Welcome. The Creative Freedom Plan is a podcast for female entrepreneurs. On this show, I'm sharing conversations with other badass women who have mastered sales, content, money, and the energetics of success. Plus, all my best strategies and tools to help you show up authentically online and sign your first 5 dream clients. My intro program, the Courageously Bold Business Bootcamp, is the one-stop shop for new entrepreneurs who want to create an irresistible high-ticket offer and attract your first clients through social marketing. Find the link in the show notes to apply, and let's get into the episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Creative Freedom Plan podcast, or welcome if you're new here and just joining for the first time. My name is Michal Emily Schuster, and I am joined here by Debbie, an incredible woman who is in my same industry of coaching and empowering women and people in business. And we got to know each other through a local organization last year, and we did some coaching together, which was incredible. And I just knew that she needed to come on the show because she has such a wealth of wisdom in terms of energy, feminine energetics, business strategy, sales strategy. She has so many amazing things to share with you today, and we'll get into all of that through her story. Debbie, if you would just give us a little intro into who you are and what you're up to in the world right now.
You bet. And thank you so much, Michal, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. And so my name is Debbie Heiser. I created a company called The Lit Up Life. And basically, what I say I do is that I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love to do without sacrificing what's important to them. And what that really means is that we dig into I do a lot with neuroscience and neuroplasticity. We dig into what are those messages that have stopped us from moving into whatever we want our life to look like. And so it's about unwinding some of those things. And once we kind of unwind and dig into that shadow side some and unwind all of that stuff, then the action pieces tend to come very quickly, right? Because we're all smart people. We, for the most part, we know we're given hits, by the universe to say, here's what your next action is, but we have to trust that we're hearing that, right? And that's a big piece of what I do, is helping to build that trust. And so I work with private clients. I have a mastermind for business women, and I put on some retreats. I am doing a retreat in the spring for both men and women, and I do a retreat in the fall for women. So, and I love what I do. I help people with freedom. I help them achieve their hopes, wishes, and dreams.
Amazing.
And, one of the things that I'm realizing is that part of my role on this earth is to be a teacher. And I started teaching, I played the piano. I started when I was 5, and I taught piano lessons in high school. And I was a teacher way back when. I got a teaching degree, and I really didn't even know why, because I really didn't want to teach in public schools. But I just felt this calling to go do that. So I've been a teacher all of my life. I teach a couple of classes at Gonzaga University, and I just love facilitating learning and helping people learn more and become more self-aware. So throughout my life, I'd done all of this. I worked in corporate America. I worked at Sprint, which was a domestic company that's no longer around anymore. T-Mobile bought them. But then I went to work for Citibank, and I worked there for a decade. And at that time, I just wasn't feeling it. It was the credit card industry. I wasn't real hip on, kind of the culture around credit cards in our country. And so they also came to me. So it was kind of like a foresight, and told me I could move to Tucson or I could take a package. And I'm not a hot weather gal, which is why I live in North Idaho and look out my window right now and see snow. And so at the time, I had a friend that lived here in Sandpoint that was introduced to me by my best friend. And she would always have dinner with a bunch of women when I would come into town. And so I had met Colleen, and she asked me to come up and help her start a new business. She had started one and sold it. And she and her sister and daughter owned the company together. And at that time, I had been in corporate, right? So everything was a 1-800 number. And I was dabbling on the side. I was helping people get their businesses ready to sell. Or, I had a local store here that's kind of like a Whole Foods kind of store that asked me to help them with their leadership and the management team that they had and communication. And And so I was doing some of this on the side and I thought, I could probably make a living from this, right? So I moved to Sandpoint in 2014 with my then husband. My son followed us after he graduated from college about, it was about almost a year later. And one of the things that I realized is that coming from a big corporation, I didn't know how to run a small business. And unfortunately, Colleen, my friend, was killed in an airplane accident on their way to Honduras on April 1st. So I moved here in January. She was killed on April 1st. And so I basically ran the company for about a year while her daughter and sister mourned. And I learned a ton. I'm self taught on QuickBooks. I had the QuickBooks for Dummies book, right? Like I didn't come from a CFO background, I'm a training and development gal. And so I learned all of that. I learned how to run a small business. I learned all the requirements, and I really feel like from a divine intervention perspective that that was prepping me to step full time into my business. So when COVID hit, the business we were in was billing for hospitals. Well, as we all know, people weren't getting surgeries, they weren't having those things. So therefore, we went from like 55 employees in 16 states to like 3 employees in California and 1 employee in Idaho, which was me. Right? So I sat down with my friend and boss at the time and said, "Look, you can't afford me anymore and you can do this. It's not that hard, and with this many employees, I don't feel right continuing to do this, right?" And she said, because we both actually had the same business coach, and she said, "Well, you've been wanting to get into this coaching thing anyway." So I stepped fully in to doing what I do in 2021. So it hasn't been that long that I've been doing this full time, but I haven't looked back. And, I feel like there's a lot of measures for success. And a big piece of my measures for success is how people have changed their lives.
Mm.
But I also know that when people change their lives, going from, 38,000 as a side gig in 18 months, having a quarter of $1 million, like there's some things I did right in spite of myself, right? Like I didn't, I had a coach, a business coach, but it was more of a mindset business coach. And so it was all of the knowledge that I had learned in corporate and learned from this great adventure that I went on in this medical billing company that really taught me how to do business in
Mm.
a smaller business format. And I feel really lucky to have been someone that was tapped on a lot in corporate America as far as like getting promotions. And I was an executive at both companies and being able to be tapped on also to train executives. Like I spent a lot of time in New York City training executives in Citibank. And I learned a lot from that experience that I was able to then transfer into what I do. So that's kind of how it happened. I'm not a firm believer. I don't tell my clients quit your job and start a new business. It's a ramp down, ramp up process. And
Mm.
sometimes people keep their W2 jobs, right? And then they do this other work because it fills their soul. And it brings in more income too. And so that's kind of how it started. And I think I've always done kind of what I'm doing now. My first real job out of college was I sold Yellow Pages. And some people listening to this might not even remember what Yellow Pages are, but like that was the thing. It wasn't Google. Right. So imagine Googling, we had a book that you opened up to attorneys if you needed an attorney, and we sold ads so that people would be placed up closer and have a higher probability of being called. So my boss at the time said to me, "You're not selling Yellow Pages, you're selling hopes, wishes, and dreams." Because the more clients you bring into people, the more money they're making and the more they're able to do what they want to do. And so I feel like it's come full circle and I'm still doing the same thing. It's
Absolutely.
right. So I have felt for a long time since I was young that I've had a spiritual DNA and I feel like I'm in the right vehicle. I know the next expansion for me is to become more of a speaker because I have a lot of I have a lot of things to share with people. And I remember being 12 and being at a faith-based Baptist revival because Baptists really like revivals, right? And I remember sitting there going, "I hope I have as many things happen as this person's had happen to them because I want to like help change people's lives." And little did I know what I was asking for, but I feel like there's this whole side of me too from my personal life that I've just recently started to speak on some things. A friend of mine has this movement called It Didn't Crush Me, and I spoke on that. And that's like very personal things that I've learned, but I feel like they both mirror. right? It's not just compartmentalized, we're whole people. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that helps me then hear things that aren't being said, right? Like I hear below the surface with people and I feel like I'm able to discern things because of that experience that I had. So that's kind of how I got started. And then I love what I do. And I'm not going to lie. Like, there have been times I was helping somebody find a corporate job, and I'm like, wow, I could do that with my eyes closed. And they're making, the same amount of money I'm making. And I could negotiate 6 weeks of vacation and, have benefits and all this stuff. And then I'm like, yeah, no, I like being an entrepreneur and I want to ski Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning. That doesn't happen in a corporate job, right?
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
the mountain opens tomorrow. What?
No, I know. I
Can't
don't think
wait.
I'm gonna make it up there this weekend, but yeah.
So I'm really curious if you could take me back to that first year. You're talking about going from 38,000
Yeah.
like side hustle kind of status to quarter of a million. What do you think are the like three maybe key kind of things that allowed you to achieve what you
Yeah.
achieved?
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna quickly kinda jot these down as I'm talking so I don't forget.
Mhm.
So I would say the biggest thing is I'm a salesperson. I love sales, right? And it's if you really think about sales, it's more about influence. And if I have something that can help someone, like, I'm not going to come right out of the gate and say, Michael, oh, do you want to hear about my new program or this or that and how much it can help you? If I don't know what's happening in your life, how can I present something? That's the ick factor, right? That we
Totally.
all associate with sales. And I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I work with, which is why I do free sales workshops on a Saturday morning. I have one I don't know when this is airing, but I have one on December 7th. I'll have another one this next like spring, early summer, because I just see people get so wigged out about sales. And so that's number 1. Like, I realized I didn't need a website. I didn't need all this stuff. I needed a list of 100 people that I knew and their phone numbers. And I picked up my phone and I called people and just connected with them, not to sell a program, but just connecting with them. And the beautiful thing, there's the law of polarity says there's two sides to everything. But the beautiful thing about our culture is it always comes to, what are you doing for work these days?
Yeah.
Right? So that's such a great lead in. For me it was, because I'm like, I'm doing the CFO job. I love it, but I'm doing this. And then as I let go of that CFO job, it was kind of like, I'm so excited. I'm doing this new thing and blah, blah, blah. But I would always ask more questions to them. Like right before we got on this podcast, she said, I'm going to talk 20% and you're going to talk 80. Same thing on a sales call. I ask really good questions to get people to open up. And I do know that a talent of mine is creating safety for people to be able to speak, because I really try to come at things with no judgment, because it's not about me, right? And so I'll ask these questions, and then inevitably I'm thinking about a friend of mine, Dorothy, who I had called her. We hadn't connected in a long time. She was a colleague at Gonzaga when I was getting my master's. And I'm just like, what are you up to these days? And she's like, well, I just started this business and I'm doing this like communication coaching and blah, 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 blah. What are you doing? I'm like, well, that's kind of what I do, is help people get their businesses going. Right. And it ended up, she came to my retreat and then became a private client. I didn't go into that conversation with the purpose of selling her into the program or into being a private client. I called her because I care about people and I want to know how they're doing.
Hmm.
That's how I started. So sales, like connecting with people, is critical. And I see, like, I've atrophied a little bit since COVID too, right? Like, there's this almost like thing about going into public places sometimes now where people have atrophied a little, but getting yourself out there, and it's not just all online, right? Like, it's making connection with people, whether that be online or in person. Yeah.
Before you jump in, because I think what I'm hearing you say, which makes it so much more accessible to the people who would be averse to sales,
Mhm.
is that you're not going for the sale
Yeah.
in these conversations. You're going for connection.
Yep.
You're asking questions to get to know someone. Because I think, a lot of what I hear in terms of resistance is like, I'm introverted, like, I'm not the kind of person to put myself out there in a really big and bold way. And it's like, fair. That's not the ask. You just need to ask good questions and form that connection, and then have that lead off point that's like, well, if you're struggling in this area, actually there's some things that I know that can
Yeah.
help you if
Yeah.
that's what you're interested in. And that's such a accessible way.
Yeah, and the thing is too, like, I'm pretty informal about it, and I'm kinda like, "Well, you wanna talk about it?" If you don't, that's cool. But if you want to talk about it, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it's because I really know myself and I don't take things personally, right? I love the movie Tommy Boy. It's an old movie, but it's about sales. And I always say you have to come into it with the vibrational energy of I've got a meat lover's pizza in the back of the trunk, right? There's a scene where he wants some wings and he finally influences somebody after like months of trying to sell something and he hasn't influenced anyone and he influences the waitress to go start the fryer to make him some chicken wings. And David Spade's like, "What the heck just happened?" And so he says, if I didn't get the wings, I got to meat lover's pizza in the back of the trunk. Right. So there's an art to this where you can't be tied to the outcome. Like if I'm calling you, Michael, and I'm talking to you and you say, yeah, I'm starting this business. We had this conversation, right? Like,
Mhm.
here's what's happening. I'm like, well, I kind of do that. I've got this retreat coming up. I'm happy to talk to you about it if you want to talk about it. And if not, I'm not tied to that. I'm not going into a call to connect with people to say, I want Michael to buy this.
Mhm.
Because the minute we do that, we show up in a different vibrational energy, right? And that's where people get the it because they've had enough of those conversations with people where people are trying to sell them something when they don't know anything about them and they don't know if even what they have is something that they need.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that just is, to me, that's inauthentic. And it's all about the person selling, not about the person you're coming. Because the law of compensation, there's a lot of things about the law of compensation. I teach a lot in universal law, so I'll refer to it a lot. But the law of compensation also says if you show up in your role that you've been given in this world and you show up in that role with the in a role of service and love, you will be compensated.
Mm. I think I've heard a quote that speaks to that, which is life supports that which supports life. If
Absolutely.
you're in a position to help other people in their life, if you're coming from a loving, service-oriented perspective, like you're going to be rewarded.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, what happens is we all look at our balance sheets and we look at our P&Ls and we think, oh my God, I got to pay my bills. So I got to go out and sell more. And that's not a great business model.
Mhm.
I mean, yes, you're constantly in sales if you're in business, and a lot of people don't like to hear that. But if you focus on the numbers, you're not going to make the sales. If you show up and how you can serve people, that's when people are attracted. So then it's not a hustle,
Yeah.
it's an attraction. So that's one big thing. The other one is mindset, right? And what I mean by mindset, that's really an overused word, but my coaches I am a coach and I have business coaches because I get too close and I get in this narrow vision of my own stuff. And so I've had coaches that have been about business, I've had mindset coaches, and that really, like my coach that I had that I went to Paris with, really changed some huge things in my mind. I had just ended a 29-year marriage. I was with him for 30 years. I felt this sense of freedom, but also fear, right? Because when you're in a good relationship, you split up things, right? Like I'm looking at my kayaks still sitting out and having snow on them that I still need to get up and that's something he would have done. But you divvy up these things. And so then when you're on your own, you kind of have this fear. And so she really helped me work through those messages, through those things. And not I am woman, hear me roar. I need to do everything by myself. Because I think also we women are taught that we don't need to rely on anyone else. If you show that you need help or support, you're weak, that is the furthest thing from the truth.
Mhm.
So, really unwinding these messages. I grew up in the church, and although these weren't the words that I heard over and over again love your neighbor at the expense of yourself, right? Like be Mother Teresa, like give to the point where you're exhausted, always being of service, when in fact, the whole basis of my faith is about receiving. And so it's really about digging in and uncovering those things. And had I not had the coaches that I've had, and I like this last year, I've had a coach that we've been really working on balancing my feminine and masculine energy. Because when you spend 20 plus years in an executive role in corporate America, you are in your masculine a lot.
Mhm.
And so, and the fun thing is I had an aura reading done in Sedona and my feminine was a little stronger than my masculine. I was like, yes. So exactly. So that might be the glow that you were speaking of. That mindset of like looking at all of these things, because what I see, and this falls into the sales workshop that I do too, is we uncover what are the messages we have about money. It used to be what's your description of a millionaire? Now it's a billionaire, right? Like, what's your description and characteristics of that person? It's
Mhm.
interesting how many negative things come out when in fact there are more millionaire and billionaire people out there that you don't hear of that don't act that way. Right? One of the first exercises I have people do is I have them figure out what's their net worth, because a lot of times people come from scarcity. If you've had any relative, if your grandparents or great grandparents were in the Great Depression, you have scarcity because it's been passed down,
Totally.
right? And so when you know that, that's empowering. It's like, okay, great. Where's this show up? For me, it shows up in the fact that I am by myself. I do not need a full refrigerator. But
Mm,
when I'm stressed, you can always tell because my refrigerator is full and I end up throwing food away, which drives me crazy.
yeah.
Right. And it just shows up. And so the mindset piece for me is so critical, because I also think we've been sold a bill of goods when people say, oh, just get to the heart of the onion. There is no heart. Right? Like, it's just a constant where scarcity shows up. It's going to start showing up a little differently. It may be a little duller. It may not be as sharp, right? But it's just layering that we work through, right? And
Yeah.
so that mindset is so critical on so many different avenues, whether it be relationships, whether it be the idea of helping people, whether it be I'm sacrificing myself, right? Which is really the victim game and martyrdom. But like all of those things have to be worked through, because I talk to so many people that get so frustrated with why they can't be disciplined in a certain action, or why they can't seem to do the thing that they want to do. And they end up beating themselves up, which then lowers their vibrational energy, when in fact it's just neuroscience. It's just a message that we've adopted as a belief. And that
Yeah.
belief is what creates the actions in our life.
Can you tell me what your coach worked with you on specifically, just to make this really tangible? You brought up fear specifically, and I'm sure that's something that anyone listening could probably resonate with and apply to their own lives. How did you get in there, find out what was blocking you, and then peel back the layers to move through it?
Oh, that's like a week-long conversation, Michael. I think the biggest piece, and I share this with all of my clients, is that fear and excitement feel the same way in your body,
Mm,
right? When we say, how do you feel? I say to people, where are you feeling it in your body? Because that's the feeling. What we normally say is feeling is emotion.
hmm
And emotions usually subside within about 90 seconds, right? So, but where are you feeling it in your body? So if I'm feeling this like kind of rumbling around in my tummy, right? That may be nerves and it may be excitement, because it feels the same way. So then it's just a choice. And I'm not saying don't feel the feels. You need to feel the emotion. You need to lean into that emotion and work through it, or it pops up in different ways. Like I can always tell that I've got some like anger that I need to work through because I start yelling at people that are not in my car. When I'm driving, right? I'm like, "Oh, yeah, time I'm annoyed. Something's digging around in there," right?
Yeah.
So that was a big piece that she said to me, choose excitement, right? Then I also realized through some of her prompting that the more and more I step into the things that create fear for me, the less power and control I give that fear.
Mm, that is huge. I love that.
Now, I will tell you, I have no desire to work on my fear of snakes, and that will not happen. I'm just way okay with not walking the Bay Trail when it's summer. I
Right.
won't do it. But there are things like I'm afraid of heights. So when I got divorced, I felt this like freedom, and I felt like I need to do some kind of ceremonial thing. So I jumped out of an airplane. Now, I kind of joke that that was the closest I've been strapped to a hot 30-year-old in a long time, right? Because I was tandem. But like, that was one of the best experiences of my life. I don't need to do it again. I mean, I would, but I don't need to. I
Mhm.
go over to this hike, Kootenai Falls, and the bridge doesn't bother me that goes over the falls. It's a little, it moves a little bit. What bothers me is there's this thing that goes over the railroad tracks, and
Mhm.
it's a graded floor. So you
Mhm.
can see through it.
Yeah.
I go there on purpose because the more and more I do it, the more my brain knows I'm not going to die. And so then my subconscious takes, I always say, have a bank, have an evidence bank. So the more and more evidence I can put in that bank, then the less fear I have, right? Somebody asked me, I just did a bucket list thing a couple weekends ago in Sedona, and some gals that I went to Paris with my coach. We still get together 3 times a year in mastermind. We did a hot air balloon ride, and it was fantastic. I've wanted to do that since I was 10. And people were like, "Weren't you afraid? Like, wasn't it scary? Did you have seatbelts on?" I'm like, "No, no seatbelts." And actually, I wasn't afraid at all. The only time I got a little like, whoo in my tummy was when I took my phone out and had it over the outside of the basket, because I was afraid somebody would like turn around, because we were pretty tight in there, and like hit me and I would drop my phone. Right? So then I started holding the phone way back here by myself, because I'm like, I can handle this. I can do something different. So it's about that awareness that, hey, I'm afraid here. So I have a choice. I can step into the fear, and some fear is good, right? The fear of heights, I'm not going to jump off of a building without
Mhm.
something to support that, right? But if the fear stops me from getting in the elevator, then that's a problem,
Right.
right? So then it's about the cycle that we use and these patterns that we use, and identifying the cycle and taking a pause and stopping in the moment to decide, what am I going to do here? Well, okay, if I'm going up the stairs and over the railroad and down the stairs in the graded thing, oh, look here, I have a hack. Don't look down. Look forward. Hang on to the railing. You know you're going to step down each step, and you can see out of the purview that you've got a landing that you're coming. Like, there's different things that you can do to help your brain not go into freak out mode, because your brain is trying to keep you safe.
Mhm.
But in the essence of keeping you safe, it stops you from doing some pretty magnificent things.
Right.
So that would, I would say, those are kind of the key things. And then also, anytime that I feel chaos, anytime I don't do overwhelm anymore, and once I made that statement that I'm not available for overwhelm, I have not felt overwhelmed. It's really interesting.
Beautiful.
But I just make the choice, right? And then I move into it. Now, there's times that I'll make a choice, and then next week the choice is like, "Oh God, am I really okay to do this?" And then I'm like, "Nope, stop, take a pause."
Mhm.
And I would say the biggest piece of that is getting to know who I am, right? Because the more comfortable I feel in my own skin, the more comfortable I'm going to feel about making those choices, because I
Mhm.
trust my intuition, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 things that she really taught me, and I use these, is that we all have loyalty packs and we have double binds. And what the double bind is that we really want something really, really badly. We want this, but we keep stopping and we can't figure out why we're stopping. Well, usually, like a double bind for me, part of why I was struggling stepping into my business sooner was because in the back of my mind, my mom passed away of breast cancer at the age of 58, which I'm going to be next year. So that's kind of an interesting like thought process that I've been going through. But she passed away, and she swore that the reason she got breast cancer was the hormones she took way back when they weren't bioidentical, and the stress of owning her own business. So here I really wanted to go into this business full time, but I was afraid, like at the subconscious level, that I was going to get breast cancer and die.
Yeah.
Where that turns into a loyalty pack then, so I had to work through that, was the loyalty pack then was, that's her story and her journey, not mine.
Yeah.
And if I walk into being an entrepreneur and I live past the age of 58, which I'm going to, it doesn't make her wrong.
Right.
Right? A loyalty pack is someone that our parents or was in a parental figure. A lot of times it's spouses, that we have this pact with them and we don't want to make them wrong.
Don't want to make them wrong by living out a story that's different than the one that they've been telling themselves.
Absolutely. And what I find with that, Michael, and this is mindset stuff, is that 9 times out of 10, we also have built in expectations into those loyalty packs, where we think that person is expecting us to behave or do something when in fact they've never said that, and they don't have that expectation. It's one we've created in our own mind,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
I had a client one time say, "Well, I have to have dinner on the table every night at 6." She was a real estate agent. And I'm like, "Well, did your husband tell you he wants dinner every night on the table at 6?" "Well, no, that's just what I have to do," right? Because that's what her family had done.
Mhm.
And it was just breaking that pattern, because that's not necessarily true. Maybe once in a while he wanted to order a pizza. But until we have that conversation with that person, We don't realize that that's not really an expectation that they have of us. We've just implied that and created it.
Projected that onto them.
Totally. And in
Yeah.
some ways, because then we don't have to take accountability for not having done what we wanted to do. Because now it's because I have to go make dinner, right? Which is the victim game.
This is the stuff, yeah, where you're projecting these rules, thinking that other people have these expectations for you,
Mhm.
and it's actually kind of giving you an out to where it's like, well,
Totally.
I would be going after what I want to do and doing what I want to do, but I've got to get dinner on the table every night at 6. So obviously, I can't do that.
And I used to do that. And my coach one time said to me, because I said, before I start this program that I want to start, I want to wait until my son gets married. He got married in September of 2019. And she looked at me and she said, Debbie, do you think Bill Gates waits until his kid gets married to like do his business? I'm like, no, thanks for pointing out that that was just an excuse.
Yeah.
Right? Because then we also get these messages about time. Will I have enough time to do this? Will I be able to, do the things I want to do?
Right.
And it's just ingrained messages. And you can't get down on yourself for having those thoughts. You don't want to guilt or shame your shame,
Hmm.
right? That's just a vicious cycle. So that mindset piece is super duper important. And there's a whole lot. I mean, that's a lot of what I coach on, a lot of what I help people work through is the mind and how that works. Because then it leads into too, and there's a lot of messaging around this, is that your role, depending on what role you have, right? Like if you're a solopreneur, I'm a solopreneur, I have a team, but they work for other people too, and basically contract with me to do certain things. And so I can't do it all by myself, what I want to do, right? Because as the CEO, if I'm not doing revenue generating tasks, that's my role and really should be the first hour of my day, right? Whatever I'm doing should be revenue producing.
Hmm.
And so where I'm going with this is when I first started to dig into this a little deeper, I was like, well, I can create my own website. I know I can. I'm smart. I kept going out and I'm like, oh, I can't do this, right? I don't want to do it. And I kept stopping myself from doing it. I'm like, Debbie, this is ridiculous. How much is it going to cost you to go hire someone? So I called a friend of mine that lives here in Sandpoint and I said, hey, you do this stuff in your sleep. You love doing this work. I know you own your own business and you're doing all this other great stuff, but would you be willing to do a side project? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. So she created my first website. Well, I had one website that I had hired somebody else for, but she went back in and transformed it because it wasn't as corporate, and redesigned it, designed worksheets for me, did all this stuff, and it was the best money I've ever spent. So we get nervous. I mean, the first thing I tell people to do is hire a bookkeeper
Mm.
because the amount of money I pay my bookkeeping service, my tax strategist accountant every month to do reconcile all my accounts because I work by the profit first methodology of like having multiple accounts. I, I could do it. I was a CFO for crying out loud. But the amount of money I pay her, if I spent those 2 or 3 hours that they're spending on my account generating revenue, I'm gonna generate 10 times the amount of money in those 3 hours than what I'm paying them, right? So, we are taught to save the money, have the money before you spend it. Now, I'm not saying go off and just be crazy, right? But what I'm saying is, like, I hired my marketing person in faith that she was gonna generate revenue and people that I don't know coming into my world that would potentially turn into clients and so then pay for itself.
Totally. Yeah.
And that's what I would say if you find yourself stopping yourself from being able to produce the type of revenue that you want to produce because of some task like setting up a landing page or a website or like right now I'm in the process of looking at trying to hire someone to help me design worksheets because I can go out and do that in Canva but I hate it. So it's like I'd rather scratch it out on a piece of paper, give somebody my vision, and they go pick the pretty pictures. And it's like walking into the grocery store and seeing 15 brand. That's why I don't like DSW. There's too many shoes.
Yeah.
Don't give me so many choices. That's when I get overwhelmed. Is like
Mhm.
too many choices. So I know that about myself. So I remove decision fatigue and choice by hiring people to help me do the things that then allow me to go make money. Like my house cleaner, she is a part of my team and she knows. I've told her, you are a part of my business team. Now I don't run it through my business, but the point being is that she frees up 4 to 5 hours a month for me to step into what I'm doing. I come home to a clean house and I'm like, oh, it's
Yeah.
worth every penny that I pay her.
I'm trying to think because I've seen this as a diagram. I've seen this as a quadrant. And I know it's like things that you're good at, things that you love doing. And like that's the ultimate. That's where you want to find the most overlap. Like you need to be spending most of your time, if not all of your time, doing the things that you love that you're good at, not the things that you're good at but you don't love doing, or the things
Right.
that you love but aren't producing revenue. It's like there's space for that, but like in terms of focusing on the business, I'm trying to think what the other
Yeah, I don't know, but you're
bottom
making me think of
quadrants
a
are.
chart that I might develop, right? That has the three
Yeah,
circles that you always see with the commonality,
just to
where,
visualize it.
yeah, what were the two things you said? What you love to do,
What you're good at.
what you're good at, and then what brings you revenue,
Yeah.
right? Because I may love something and I'm really good at it, but it's not bringing me any revenue.
Yes.
I may love something and be good at it, and it's not bringing me revenue because it's very purposeful,
Mhm.
right? Like when I'm on a board and giving back to my community, it's almost four circles. It's an energy give back.
Mhm.
Right? So if it's hitting a couple of those things where it's something I really love to do and I'm enjoying it and it's giving me an energy, it's almost like the two things at the bottom. I'm going to create a visual out of this. Thank you. That currency might be someone, like I just had somebody bring me these beautiful gifts from New Skin the other day, right? Because I had gifted her something. And so that's not like cash flow, but I'm gaining something from that, right? So if
Yeah.
it's hitting something in that I'm gaining energy or I'm gaining currency from it, and it's hitting one of these, I love it and I'm good at it, then why not? I need a designer to help me create that visual.
Yes. So we hit on sales.
Yep.
We hit on mindset. Was there any other piece
The
of the
third one is
puzzle?
hire somebody to help you
Okay.
do the things that you're stopping yourself from, whether that's cleaning your house, whether that's and you might say, "Oh, I can't afford that." And I would back up and say, "Okay, what could you do in that 3 or 4 hours
Yeah.
that would create more revenue than what you're paying her or him?" Right?
Mhm.
Same thing with like looking at bookkeeping, looking at people to help you with your website. And there are people out there, I'm not going to lie, that will charge you way more than what needs to be charged. But there are a few things like you don't need a website to start your business. You need a list of 100 people and a phone and a pen,
Mhm.
right? Like, and a piece of paper. And so, but there are certain businesses that it helps to have those things. And so hiring someone that's not charging you $10,000, $12,000 to create a pretty basic website, but having somebody go out and do good work, put it together. And not that it's not worth that in the long run, but if you're just starting a business, you're going to go through 2 or 3 iterations of a website.
Totally. Yeah. I love what you said about having a list of 100 people and a way to contact them, because in this day and age, that's your Facebook following. And just about anyone who has a desire to step into business or create a side hustle, or, sell something online,
Yeah.
you've got probably 100 followers
Oh,
or a
totally.
lot more, and they've already given you permission to contact them because you have that message, you have that call functionality, and that's all it takes.
Absolutely. I can't tell you. So when I'm at my best, I have, and I have to kind of shift it this time of year. So that's why I'm like at my best, because when I ski Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I don't have those mornings. But the
Mhm.
first hour to an hour and a half, I have blocked out to make connection calls.
Yeah.
And what I found that works best for me is on a Monday, I'll connect with 25 people, right? Via Facebook Messenger, texting them, or picking up the phone and calling them. And I just reach out. I don't do email because entrepreneurs, we have way too many emails and emails get lost. But a lot of people check Facebook or Instagram that are on there, and a lot of people will, like, I have a lot of people's phone numbers, right? And
Mhm.
so one of the things actually that my marketing person and I've been talking about, and I don't know if it'll turn people off, but I have a group called Build Her that's a free group. But I'm like, I want their phone numbers because I want to be able to text them and say, I love connecting with people. I'm not going to sell you, unless there's spidey senses that something comes out, I'm going to mention it. But like, I just want to connect with people and hear their stories. And so it's harder to do that when you don't have a phone number to text them, right? Because
Mhm.
people will see their Facebook messages and then they'll forget about them too. So I don't think there's any right or wrong way. I think it's just consistency and showing up. But yeah, by I don't even know where we're going. Sorry, I went into a tangent of something, but
No, this is amazing because I think a lot of my followers are in that just kind of like pushing through any barriers that they have to getting started phase. And I love what you're highlighting on, which is like, you don't need like the facade, like let's call it, like you don't need a perfect website, you don't need
yeah,
like all of these visual things in place, you need connections with other people, you need like a solution to a problem or
yep,
a product or artistic things that you're developing, and it's really just making connections with people, having that intention to connect on a daily basis. Like, yeah, if you reached out to 10 people and you had 1,000 followers every day, well, that's like 100 days of just like connecting. And yeah, not everybody's going to see it and not everybody's going to respond, but sales is also kind of just a numbers game.
yeah.
And you have to hit that volume really in order to get some return on that time that you're investing.
Yeah, and I have to be honest, like, I've tried to use my CRM, and as much as my ops marketing person wants me to always use it, and she's really cool, she's like, "I get it," right? I have a notebook, over here on my shelf, I have a leather little notebook that I list out 100 people, and I keep going back to some of the same people on the list, but as my followers grow, as people that I connect and meet grow, I add them to the list and I follow up with them, and I make little notes about I left a message on this date or whatever, and following back up with them. And the reason I tend to just reach out to like 25 people on Monday is then inevitably I'll get a certain amount of those people that respond. And then I know that my time is blocked out and I can set up virtual coffee. I can set up a coffee date with them. I can like set up a meeting with them during that time. And then it allows me also time to follow up with people, but take notes because I did that where I didn't take notes. And then I'm like, oh my God, I have 50 people I've reached out with in the last 2 weeks and I don't remember. Did I leave them a message? Was it on Facebook? Was it, so I have my own little system that I keep notes with and I highlight and then I recreate the list again because it gets all mucky. And
Mhm.
then once I get somebody that's a hot lead, I'm supposed to go out and add it to my CRM. But really, what I do is once something happens and they become some type of client, I'll add them to my CRM, right?
Mhm.
If they're not already there.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is just about connection. I had somebody that was a friend of mine. I was actually a client of hers for a while, and we met for 3 years over coffee. And one day we met and she's like, "Hey, so and so that's a friend of mine that you've been working with has just been banging it out. Like they're doing fantastic. Like, what's happening?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. You'll have to ask them, right?" I thought, we're here as friends. I'm not going to go into the sales mode right now.
Yeah.
So, but my spidey senses were out. That's the important thing. So then 2 days later, I called her back. I said, "Hey, I don't know, but it felt like you were putting out some hints that you maybe wanted to talk about what it would look like to be a private client. If that's not the case, no harm, no foul. But I just want to make sure that if you were putting out hints, that I was picking up on those. And if you wanted to have a conversation, we could have a conversation." She's like, "Yeah, actually, I did." She ended up being a client and she referred like 3 or 4 other people to be clients. She was local. And it was funny because every client that she would send me, I'd send her a $50 gift card to Evans Brothers,
Mhm.
local coffee house. And I had one person come in and say, "Well, I have to sign up with you because I want her to get the $50 gift card." And I'm like, "Well, it's a lot cheaper to just go buy the gift card." Right. But I wasn't afraid to say that to somebody. I wasn't afraid that
Yeah.
they were going to say, "Oh, I'm going to leave," because I really niched into what their need was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really curious about balancing feminine and masculine energy
Yeah.
and what that's looked like for you and any kind of
Ooh.
advice that you can share.
It has been, I have some songs that I listen to pretty frequently that immediately bring me down into my heart, because I feel like there's a mind, body, heart connection, right? And your intuition is part of that spiritual piece of it.
Mhm.
And I spend a lot of time up here and I can get very task orientated. And so for me, it's about kind of slowing down. It's about being in nature. It's about pausing. I don't have like a disciplined meditation necessarily, other than I on purpose have one of those. I don't even know what they're called. It's not a hot water tank, but it's one of those like tankless hot water heaters because I take
Mhm.
really long showers, TMI. But
Mhm.
that kind of tends to be my meditative, and I'll get a lot of downloads
Mhm.
when I'm in the shower. And so that is probably the most consistent piece. I do a lot of, like throughout the day, I'll do some hits. I just recently came across one that my coach recommended to me, and she actually provided a word to me and then provided a second word. And I'm, as I feel called to change the word, I will. But my word now is soft, right? Like
Mhm.
staying in the softness. And
Mhm.
so keeping this harmony, this balance between the two. And so I'll literally just sit down and say, okay, for my root chakra, please bring in the vibration of softness. Please allow softness to come into my root chakra and then into my orange chakra, because I can never remember what that one's called. Like, come into my orange chakra in the vibration of softness. Let softness come in. And I'll change the wording sometimes, but I go all the way up my chakras, and it's just a pause, right? It allows me to slow down and move into that feminine. Also, it's about, I had some really good observations that I'm now practicing. Like, I remember being married and I would get annoyed at my then husband for opening the car door for me because I'm like, it's cold. Get in and start the car. I want some heat, right?
Mhm.
Instead, he's just trying to serve me.
Mhm.
He wants to open the door for me. What's the harm in that? So
Mhm.
now I'll go places, and I used to be the one that always opened the door for everyone. And now people will open the door for me because I allow it, right? Like, I'm being very mindful about some of those types of things that allow me to step into that. When I'm at the grocery store, I try to spark up conversation with people. I spark up conversation with people in an airport. And some people would say that's somewhat masculine, starting up the conversation, but I really try to listen from the heart. And a lot of times I'll touch my heart space, right? Because it reminds me, stay here. There's a couple of songs. One of them is called, I don't remember the name of the artist, but I'll look it up here really quickly. But there's a couple of songs that when I know that I've been very task focused on things, one of them is called "Stay in My Heart," and it's by WAH exclamation point. And then the other one is "I Am Light."
Mhm.
And if I just listen to that for a couple of minutes, the other thing I do too that I think is helpful, if I'm working, I'll go onto Spotify and I'll just do like a all chakra hertz clearing and just play the music behind me as I'm working, and it keeps me grounded, right? For me, the feminine is about staying grounded.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, maybe we should talk about that for anyone who's not really familiar with these terms. How would you characterize masculine energy
oh yeah.
versus feminine energy and like the importance of balancing?
Yeah, and it's not in a lot of today's conversation around physiology or sexuality. That's not what I'm referring to here with energy. Although I kind of think people that associate as they are onto something, because we need both masculine and feminine characteristics to be whole, right?
Mhm.
So the feminine is about creativity. It's about innovation. It's about nurturing. It's about um, receiving. Are we open? I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I talk to that they have money coming at them every which way, but they keep deflecting it.
Could you tell me like an example of what that would look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So someone says, "Here's kind of what I do." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm interested in talking to you." "Oh, well, I'll give it to you free because you're talking to me." Well, no, this 30 minutes that we're doing a connection call is for me to determine it. Like when you sign up for a clarity call, that says to me, you want to talk about my programs. That's different than me connecting with people, right?
Mhm.
So just because I'm offering that to you for free doesn't mean you have to give me something back in return, right? Um, Now I get it because my love language is giving gifts or receiving gifts more than giving, but like, and I love to give really good gifts, but
Mhm.
it's like I see people deflect help. Well, here, let me help you with this. Oh, no, 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 I got it. A prime example that I had to stop myself with, not only the opening of doors, but when I travel, I can't tell you how many, and I don't know, it's usually men, how many men offer to help me put my luggage up because I don't check bags very often. And at first I was like, I got this, right? Like, I got it, back off. That's deflecting.
Mhm.
And it's not direct money, but it's about, to me, abundance is not just money. And when I practice receiving in other areas of my life, it's easier for me to receive money.
Absolutely.
When
Yeah.
I say my program is this price, I don't discount. I may add value and
Mhm.
say, I'll bonus you this, but this is how much I charge. Too many people, I say, they do this and then they discount it. Well, that to me says you're discounting your expertise, what you do. Now I get that we're kind of conditioned in this world to like be in a discount mind frame, right?
Mhm.
But then when you bonus things, people are like, oh, I'm getting more than what I paid for, right? It's just a different psyche. But I see people do that. I see people deflect money because they're not charging what they're worth. I was just talking to someone the other day that was like, oh, I charge $150 for, like X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, what? Like, are seriously? Like, this is a $500 thing. And when you don't charge enough, people sometimes don't think you're good at what you do.
Yes.
And so it's like, whoa, wait a minute. And it's just they don't have their arms around it's a worth thing. It's a core wound, right? Which is
Mhm.
where I was talking about. We get into this mindset. We get into what are those core wounds that show up for us. And so when we deflect people giving to us, that's the same as deflecting money. So that then when money is coming in, we're deflecting it. We don't stop long enough when I say to you, hey, here's the 3 programs I do. But when I think about those 3 programs, here's based on what you told me, X, Y, and Z, that I think probably would help you the best.
Mhm.
You want to do that. And then I shut up. So a way that we deflect is then we try to justify why we're suggesting it. You already just did that,
Like anticipating resistance without it actually being there.
which is another way we deflect,
Mhm.
right? We automatically think people are going to say it. We automatically think the most negative of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the way that you're translating these real life examples, like with the luggage, into like a business context, because I feel like my perception of a lot of women who I observe to be in their masculine energy is that when somebody goes to help them, or like a man goes to help them, the implication is that you're not capable,
Yeah.
you're not strong enough. And so they want to stand up for themselves and be like, no, I am capable. Like, I can handle this luggage by myself. I can get the damn door. Just get out of the way.
Yeah.
But I think what's important to acknowledge in those situations is like to receive a gift well, or an exchange of energy well, is a gift to the person who's attempting to do something nice for you.
Absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
what's so powerful.
Yeah, I will tell you, I come from a family that used to argue with people that tried to pay. I stopped doing that because I'm like, you know what? If somebody just bought me coffee, I'm going to say to them, you know what, Michael, thank you so much for picking up my coffee. I wasn't expecting that, but it's such a treat. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Like, what a gift that I just gave that person who wanted to give. But when I push back, it's like slapping
Yeah,
them in the face.
right.
I didn't expect for someone to pay for my coffee, but I think that's where, and I'm going to go out on an edge here, and then I'll talk about what the masculine looks like. There's a book called The Queen's Code.
I just heard of this. You know what I'm listening to right now is Keys to the Kingdom, because that was on Audible, but I was looking for the Queen's Code.
It's not on Audible, but it's
It's
Alison Armstrong.
not.
And
Mhm.
I have made as a matter of fact, I need to get this going because I haven't done it yet this year, but I made a pact with myself I was going to read it every year because it's written in a story form. So when I was in my deep masculine, I was like, just get to the point, right? And at the end of each chapter, she kind of summarizes the points, but it's really about the fact, not in a manipulative way, but men want women to be happy. They want to treat us like queens.
Mm,
And I love the women's movement, don't get me wrong, but I feel like sometimes we've gone so far to say that when men offer to assist us with something, they're saying we're not capable, when in fact, that is the furthest thing from the truth. They want to be of service.
yeah. Oh, I get goosebumps talking about this because it just rings so true.
Yeah. So in a way, then, like I know in my marriage, I demasculated my husband numerous times. And then I was his critical parent. The man couldn't do anything right.
Mm,
And so part of that book talks about that, right? And it talks about how too, like in a relationship, that men give out bids for connection in a different way. And men do not pick up on subtleties.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times, and she uses this story in here where this woman says, honey, can you take out the trash? Well, in her mind, she's thinking right now.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, yeah. And then 2 hours later, he comes and gets it. And she's mad because he hasn't taken the trash out yet.
Mhm.
Versus saying, hey, can I get your help right now?
Yeah.
Right? Can you take the trash out for me? And he's like, oh, yeah, sure. Because men physiologically, they have one stem that goes to their ears that comes into their brain. Women have two that come from their ears into their brain, which is why women multitask better than men. It's physiological.
And women pick up on the subtleties and, like, the conversation beneath
Totally.
the conversation so much more
Totally.
readily.
Totally. So read that book. And some
Absolutely.
people that, are gonna go, "Yeah," about a few things in it, but it
Mhm.
is so spot on. And then what happens too is the masculine takes the innovation, takes the creativity, and creates form,
Mm.
right? So the form is in structure, it's in processes, it's in action, inspired action, right? But you gotta get the inspiration from the feminine, and then
Mhm.
the action comes into play. Right? So that's really more about the doing. I guess when you break it down, the feminine's more about the being and the masculine's more about the doing.
Beautiful.
And that's just really simplistic. So it doesn't hit everything, but like just from a simplistic perspective. So I
Yeah.
could be in my feminine and have all this creativity and do all this stuff. But if I don't take the action to call people and connect with them, I can have all this stuff out here great. And I have clients that do that, right? They create and they create and they create. And, nothing drives me crazier than when people think every 3 years they gotta rebrand. Now, I know you do some rebranding stuff, but it's like, you don't need to rebrand every 3 years. Now, if you change the course of your business, absolutely. I've done it, I
Mhm.
rebranded, but people use that as a crux because they haven't done the action, so they don't understand why things aren't happening.
Mhm.
And so it's about walking that balance of, and I don't love the word balance, but kind of I look at it more as an infinity loop. That was my first logo, right? Like this infinity loop of you move back and forth into these, and that's what creates the flow.
I love that. Yeah. And then can you touch on when you're stuck in the doing or you're so focused on strategy without the foundational kind of inspiration or like the feminine aspect that plays into that?
Yeah, so I will tell you, and I kind of hope that my chief community builder listens to this. My chief community builder, Sarah, is a constant reminder for me because when I get into my masculine, part of it's because my schedule's really tight, and I'll be like, hey, I need X, Y, and Z. And the opposite of that is she'll say, "Hey, happy Monday," or "Hey, hope you're enjoying the sunshine," right? The
Mhm.
connection piece is in there, and it's a constant reminder to me, like, take a breath, connect, drop in. So, like, I physically sometimes will be like, connect, drop in, right?
Mm.
I also go do nature walks to connect and do that. So, how I repeat that question.
If you're stuck
Oh,
in
yeah.
like
Thank
masculine energy in your business, how do you bring in the feminine?
Yeah, sometimes it's actually getting up and walking away from my desk. Right? If I'm doing things.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a matter of I'll just go outside and walk around the block just to get some fresh air, and allow my brain to just kinda settle.
Because something that you touched on earlier was like when you're in that meditative sort of space, that's when the downloads come in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when I get the inspiration, right? That's when I get the messaging. And so what I find too is the universal law of rhythm talks about also being in touch with your circadian rhythm.
Mm.
Right? And it's interesting because I've always been a morning person, and it's almost I've been feeling a little bit of a shift, which is interesting to me because I used to get up at 5 and study every day. That's how I got through my master's. And, I'd set my alarm for 7 because then I knew I needed to go up and shower and get ready. I didn't have any meetings before 10 a.m. Like these are just certain things that I did. But now I'm finding like I'm almost like needing a little bit more rest in the morning. And now I have a little bit of a like between 10 and about 2 is my sweet spot. And so it's shifting a little bit, but it's important. The universal law of rhythm is about like notice your rhythms because everything in this world has rhythm. You look at nature, it's all about rhythm. The moon cycles, the waves, the like growth cycle, everything. There's this rhythm. So if you can tap into your rhythm, and when you're in your sweet spot, that becomes when you're generating revenue for your business, that's when you're creating and innovative. Like I can work with clients whenever because that fills my bucket. I also know if I'm doing a speaking engagement, do not put me after 2 o'clock. Like
Mm,
I'm fine now because I did some things this morning to like shift my circadian rhythm. But when I'm speaking in front of a big group, and you've seen it a couple times on here, my mind, I lose things, right? It's not as sharp for me. So it's about also getting in touch with that circadian rhythm to then be able to know I need to create some masculine structure to be at my most favorite self, right? When am I going to get the most focus done? When am I going to be like, I don't work out in the morning because that used to be my focus time. I work out
mm,
after work because that's the time when I'm just like, I just need to go in and do this workout that I've got listed out on a sheet or have a personal trainer and do my thing, right? So getting in touch with that circadian rhythm is important. Sometimes, like in my situation on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, if I want to ski, I ski from I'm up at the first chair at 9 and I go until noon, right? So it
mhm,
hits a part of my sweet spot, but
mhm.
I'm also getting downloads while I'm skiing. And
Totally.
so then it's about how do I shift that to have my circadian rhythm work the best for me. And that's where you have to kind of be in tune with that circadian rhythm, which is the more feminine of awareness, and then the masculine is setting up structure to be able to maximize the efficiencies with them.
Mhm. I love that. I love that emphasis on being in tune and just kind of observing what's going to be most naturally effective for you. Because I think it is something that you figure out by living your life, by being in it. There's no way to really kind of sit back and think, okay, what's the perfect plan? Like I'm going to be over here and I'm going to come up with the perfect schedule for myself for my day, and it's going to set me up for long-term success, because it's going to ebb and it's going to flow, and it's just something that you have to be attuned to as you're experiencing it.
Absolutely. And then I would say, Michael, too, one of the things that I got out of Atomic Habits um, is this habit stacking,
Mm,
right? So I know, like right now, it's changed and I'm doing something completely different. But I knew that when I worked out after work, that if I went home, because I have a bunch of workout stuff at home, I have a spin bike, I've got like a little treadmill next to me here on my stand up desk, and
mhm.
I've got weights at home and all this kind of stuff. And so I would sometimes do workouts at home. So when I was doing workouts at home, if I went home and changed my clothes at home, it was much harder for me to work out than if I brought my workout clothes to work and I changed my clothes at work just like I was going to the gym. And then I went home, went straight to my workout area and did my workout, and then came back like, okay, now I'm home. Right.
Smart.
Yeah. And so it's about
Yeah.
thinking about those. Like I was laughing, I was re listening to Profit First again. And he talks about how he used to set his tennis shoes on the toilet seat because every morning he'd get up to go to the restroom, and then it was a reminder of get your workout clothes on and go. Right.
Yeah.
And so if you can habit stack like that, that helps too. Right. As you're figuring out your circadian rhythm, there are certain things that maybe you aren't a part of your routine
Mhm.
that you're wanting to make more routine. And so, and I've had habits that I've gotten into sometimes too, where I come home and I'm like, I bring my computer home to do a couple of things. And then I'm like, yeah, don't touch it, which is way okay too. But then I sit down and I like watch 4 episodes of Yellowstone, right? Like,
Mhm.
and so it's okay to do that once in a while. But when it starts to become a pattern, right, then
Right.
it's about how do I break this pattern? Because I'd much rather read, so I hide the remote and set the book down where I sit on the couch. Right? It's just little
Yeah.
hacks that really
Yeah.
make a difference.
Yeah. Kinda
What ha
negotiating with yourself.
Absolutely. And then also noticing your environment, because I am a reader and I have tons of books, and I used to have this stack of books on my nightside table. But what would happen is those books, every night I went to bed going, I still haven't cracked any of those books. Then what was the first thing I saw every morning?
Yeah.
So I continued to beat myself up and subconsciously, right? Like then it just kept lowering my vibration. So I've moved all those books. They're not on my bedside table anymore. My little lavender spray is, and my remote to my bed,
Uh-huh.
because I have one of those old lady beds that like will sit up, because I look out to the lake, and if I want to read, so there's things that you can do to set yourself up for success if you're trying to change a habit, because the habit is directly related to a belief.
Mhm.
And sometimes you've changed the belief, but it's not a part of that routine or that circadian rhythm.
Mhm.
right? And so it's about creating that because most of us, I'm not going to speak for everyone, most of us get up in the morning, we use the restroom, and we brush our teeth.
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but I have a certain routine that I just subconsciously do and I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
But if I end up washing my face before I wash my hair, my whole rest of my day feels like it's out of whack. Right? 'Cause somewhere I deviated from the matrix, right? Like I deviated from this pattern that I was used to doing. So a
Mhm.
lot of people wanna create some things that fall into a pattern, and you can do that without having to use a lot of brain energy to remember that.
Mm.
I tell people also, like, from both a masculine and feminine perspective, just managing your energy, think about where you have to make decisions. And, like, I know there are certain I shop the perimeter of my grocery store, and occasionally there's a few things I'll, like, jump into the aisle for because I don't even wanna see all the other possibilities that could be
Yeah.
out there. It's decision fatigue for me, right? Same thing of, Barack Obama used to wear the same 5 suits. It was because he
Mhm.
didn't wanna have decision fatigue. Steve Jobs wore basically the same outfit all the time because he didn't wanna have one more decision to make about something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Debbie. You shared such incredible wisdom, and there's so many gold nuggets and little clips I can't wait to cut out of this conversation. Maybe we could wrap it up with just a piece of advice that you might want to share with your younger self, at any stage in your journey that is something that you know now that would have really maybe changed the game for you back then, knowing that there's probably going to be people listening who are at a similar point in their lives and could really benefit from that wisdom that you now have.
Yeah, I would say, because I've done this exercise numerous times, I would say 2 things. One is quit worrying about how much you weigh. I can't tell you how much energy and space in my brain about worrying about how much gravity pull I have on this earth.
Thank you for saying that so much.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, that would be one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is if you have a deep want and a desire. For me, I'm a faith-based person. It could be universe, Buddha, whatever it is for you. Don't get caught up in the semantics. That the universe has placed on your heart, that is spiritual in nature. And so go forward knowing that the how will come to you, right? The
Mm,
faith is knowing that that next step will appear. All you have to do is take the next step. And
yeah.
once you do, the step after that will appear. And don't let anybody stop you from doing it. Now,
Yeah.
there's price tags on things, right? And at the time, I wasn't willing to give up my marriage at that time, right? To do that. And I'm not saying you have to give up your marriage to like do the desires that you have,
Mhm.
but I wasn't being supported in something that I really wanted to do. And it would have all been fine. Like we probably would have still been together. It wouldn't have been, but I just understand and trust yourself
Mhm.
that what's coming to you is of a spiritual nature and that it's not the Willy Wonka girl that says, I want, and blows up into a big blueberry, right? What a subliminal message that we as women can't say what we want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would say to my younger self, go after what you want.
I love that.
Okay.
Your desires are your destiny, and they
Absolutely. I love that.
matter.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Beautiful. And I love what you brought up about, like, don't worry about what number your body attaches to because it's completely irrelevant. That
Yeah.
was something that I fixated on for way too long. Now
And
I couldn't even tell you what I weigh. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me. I don't
yeah.
think about it at all.
And so
What
much
is it?
shame and guilt, right? Around it and feeling like you don't fit in and all these other things. And I'm like, it's just like having somebody over at my house. I don't care if my house is messy. They're not coming there to see my house. They're coming to see me. Same thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and I still struggle with that occasionally because it's so ingrained. Like when you think about neuroplasticity, it's like water buffalo going to a watering hole,
Mm.
right? And they create this gorge because they're going to the watering hole, and all of a sudden, one of them decides to go a different way, but it's not a path yet, right? And that's how changing the neuroplasticity happens. And then you go back to this known
Mm.
path, So there's times I go back to the known path because we all do that, but it's about being conscious about changing So with that weight thing, I would say, watch how you speak to yourself. And would you speak to your children or your grandchildren or a young person that way? I know the way I talk to myself, I would not have spoken anyway to anybody else that way.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was something that changed my life. The quote, how would you care for yourself if you were caring for yourself like someone you're responsible for helping, not hurting,
Yeah.
helping.
Yeah.
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 I love that. Thank you so much again for
Thank
being on the
you.
podcast. This has been incredible. And I would love for you to share what is going on in your world, how people can get involved, where they can find you on the internet, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm out on all the social stuff. It's either the Lit Up Life or Lead Your Life. I have a podcast called Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I'm out on Facebook. I do have a women's business group called Build Her, that you can go out. We do ask a few questions because, it's not a place to spam people or whatever, but that's there. Go out to my website, thelituplife.com. The sales workshop's not out there right now, but it will be. My marketing person and I just had a conversation yesterday about putting it out there so that if people were going out to the website and saw that and wanted to register, they could. And I would say just follow on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Take a look at those things because we put out. And if you want to get on my email list, go out to thelituplife.com. And somewhere in there it says like get on our mailing list. And then you can get some emails too that announce some of the programs that we have coming up. We have a December 7th sales workshop that's free. It's a Saturday morning for 3 hours. And I do things very interactive, even on Zoom. We have, because I love this is that one where it just like gives back. It's a very low price point. But I love doing vision boards because I do them a little differently. So I'm doing a virtual vision board night in December or January, excuse me. I want to say it's like the 13th or 14th of January. And then in the spring, it will be the Saturday. It's in April, the Saturday before Easter, the Saturday after Easter. I'm doing a similar retreat to what I do locally here in October, but I'm doing it virtually. And yes, people will get swag. And there's a VIP option for networking and other things that go along with that that'll be coming soon. So there's constantly things that I'm doing that are out there that you can take a look at. But the website's probably the best place to go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will have all of those links in the description, easy access for you listening and watching. And thank you for tuning in. We will see you next time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Creative Freedom Plan podcast. And if you loved it so much you'd like to shout from the rooftops and share it on social media, be sure to screenshot, tag me at Michal Emily Schuster, and share it to your story so I can stalk your profile and we can connect over there. Much love to you, and I will see you in the next episode.